Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. My name's Sophie, and I'm a bookseller at Belmont Books. For those of you who don't know, Belmont Books is a locally owned independent bookstore in the greater Boston area. Before we begin, I also want to let you know we have a number of virtual events coming up, including 2 panels for our Bookstore Romance Day, which is on Saturday. At noon, we have our Falling for Foodies panel with Sonali Dev, Farah Heron, Anita Kelly, and Suzanne Park. And at 2, we'll be having our Sword, Sorcery, and Smooching panel with Lana Harper, Chloe Neal, and Elle Penny. You can register, or Elle Penelope. You can register for both those on our website at belmontbooks.com. If you have any questions throughout the panel, please type them into the Q&A section, and we'll get to those at the end. And very excited to welcome Gary and Susan. I'm going to give you a brief little introduction about them, and then we'll turn it over. So Gary Goldstein is the award-winning writer for film, television, and theater with more than 30 produced screen and stage credits. He's been a contributing film reviewer and arts feature writer for the LA Times since 2007, and his debut novel, The Last Birthday Party, comes out tomorrow. And Susan Walter has been a writer, producer, and director working in film and television for over 2 decades. Her feature film, All I Wish, came out in 2018 and is streaming on Netflix. And her debut novel, Good as Dead, comes out on October 1st. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Gary and Susan.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Sophie.
Sophie. Appreciate it.
And thanks to all you for jumping on and Zooming with us. I'm just so excited to be here and to be talking to my old friend, Gary. We've known each other quite some time. Not old. And so, Gary, first, let me just say congratulations. I absolutely adore this book. I think I read it in 2 sittings. It made me laugh. It made me verklempt. I fell in love with the characters, and by the end, they felt like old friends. So thank you for giving me a journey that was just buoyant and full of love and hope and characters that were real and nuanced and wonderful. Bravo.
Thank you. I have to go back and reread this book now after I have an introduction like that. Anyway, thank you. Thank you for the support.
Yeah, I think it's traditional with Belmont Books for the author to start by reading a passage. Do you feel like doing that now?
I would love to. Let me set up the story a little bit. The book is about Jeremy Lerner, who turns 50. The day after his 50th birthday party, he's visited by a series of calamities, 1, 2, 3 within 24 hours, and his whole life falls apart. And then it magically comes back together again over the course of a year in very unexpected ways. One of the things that happens to him is he has a very bad accident, like hit a fall, and he has to wear this giant abduction brace with a pillow. It's over your shoulder. It's supposed to keep your arm straight, and he has to wear it for 6 weeks. And you can't really do much with it, but you have to keep your arm straight. It's like wearing a giant little refrigerator over your shoulder. So he needs an occupational therapist to help him sort of learn how to just get through the daily routine. And he's a writer, and he can't write with it because it's his right hand. He's right-handed. So this is the third. This is toward the first third of the book, and it's when Jeremy and Annabelle have their third session, occupational therapy session, and they're kind of falling for each other, which was not on the plan. So Annabelle starts talking. Wow, you're actually doing it. You must be feeling pretty good. I'm super happy for you, Jeremy. And with that, she took his free hand and gave it a little squeeze, holding on to it just long enough for it to be both awkward and stirring. She quietly pulled it away, but held on to his eyes. Sorry, I don't make a habit of grabbing my clients' hands non-therapeutically. But Annabelle didn't look sorry, or for that matter, self-conscious, the way she did just a few minutes before. Jeremy leaned against the sink and assessed her. He never noticed just how dark her eyes could look, how they could go from brown to near charcoal with the merest tilt of her head, and then back again without warning. There were deep, inviting pools. He wanted to kiss her. So he did, in his mind. Annabelle moved a step toward Jeremy. Wait, was she going to kiss him? Should he just lean in? And I forgot, she said, straightening up just as Jeremy was about to bravely tilt toward her. What was the kiss equivalent of stopping on a dime, he wondered. She says, you wanted me to show you how to adjust that strap around your neck. Annabelle pointed at the bothersome harness. It hurts, huh? Jeremy nodded gingerly. He moved in, and using both hands, she swiftly adjusted the strap buckle that was denting the back of his neck. As they were pretty much nose to nose, Jeremy could smell the faint, powdery tang of her perfume, unassuming yet alluring, like the wearer herself. She made a few quick tweaks to the wide strap that circled the entire brace at waist level, and voila, Annabelle eyed her handiwork. Better, she asked, still inches from him or as close as the stupid abduction pillow would allow? Jeremy nodded yes, praying she couldn't hear his heart pounding, though you'd have to be deaf not to. It won't last. The thing moves around so much, Annabelle said, studying his stubbly face, but at least you'll get some relief. And before another word could be spoken, their lips connected in one perfectly synced motion, and they shared a rather terrific kiss. Strangely, or maybe not, Jeremy's heart stopped pounding and started swelling. And for more, you'll have to read the book.
Wait, what was that? Almost a perfectly, something terrific kiss. Say that again.
I lost the page. I lost the page.
Oh.
In a perfect, they had a great kiss.
They did have a great kiss. And I'm sorry to interrupt you with my giggles. I realize, you and I both come from film and TV. And when you're on a film set, you're not allowed to laugh because it ruins the take. And I think I did that to you. My apologies. It's
the world of giggles. I want the laughter for sure.
Yeah, it is. There are a lot of laughs in this book. So speaking of coming from screenwriting and film and TV, so this is your first novel. You've had many movies made as a screenwriter. So this is like a renaissance for you, right? A new career. Tell us what inspired you to make the switch.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it any kind of reinvention. I've just, over the course of my writing career, I've just tried different things. I've just tried to expand what I know, expand what I write. And I find that, so I started off writing for TV, and I moved into writing feature films, and then I moved into sort of expanded into playwriting, expanded into TV movies, and all the different writing disciplines really kind of helped each other, and I continued to kind of do all of them at the same time. And then, but I've been a huge reader my whole life. I love books, and to this day, I'm always reading something. And I just said, I really want to write a novel, but I don't really feel I have the time to devote to write, to what I think it'll take to write a novel, because it just seems so long. And I read something online at the end of 2019, some writer I follow, and he said, if you're a screenwriter and you've always wanted to write a book, but you think that you don't have the time to do it, think of it this way. If you wrote a page a day, if you started at the first of the year, wrote a page a day, by the end of the year, you'd have the first draft of your book. And I was like, well, that's not such a novel idea, no pun intended, all puns intended, but it just sort of made sense. And I said, I'm going to do it. And I wasn't really sure what my story was going to be, but January 3rd or 4th or something last year, before the pandemic, a couple of months before the pandemic, I just started writing. And I wrote more than a page a day. And by July, I had the first draft of the book done. And I was kind of amazed. And it actually, I thought it was pretty good, and I didn't really know what I had, but I felt good enough about it that I was going to try to get it published. And I did more editing on it, did more work, and then ultimately was able to find a publisher. But it was quite a journey. It continues to be. I've learned a ton, but it's very different than screenwriting. The storytelling is not so different, but you really, as the author, as a writing a book versus a screenwriter, you have to be the camera. In a movie or TV script, you kind of create the blueprint for something, whereas in a book, you have to explain all of the you have to create the world, and you have to really make everything very visual and really move your characters around in a way that you don't have to necessarily in a screenplay. So that part was a little bit different. And also, I'm a journalist, so I felt like the prose writing was kind of very not dissimilar from when you write when you interview somebody and you write quotes and things. But punctuation was different, setup was a little bit different. But it wasn't so it felt like a natural segue. It was a leap, but it felt like a pretty natural segue.
Okay, so I want to ask you something that I'm curious about, because when I write characters, whether it's for a movie or for my book, I often look to people in my life for inspiration, right? To capture their essence. So I'm trying to create a character and I was like, who is that? Oh, that's Gary, or that's that jerk I met 10 years ago. And I'm going to put him in there. It's great to do it to people you don't like. And then you can even use their actual name. Secret. So I'm just curious, do you do that too? Do you draw from people in your life? And if so, do you tell them?
Probably not, because I've written things where people have said, that character, it reminded me exactly of your friend so and so, whatever, and it was basically I was writing that person that thought it was somebody else, and so it's sort of like sometimes people are offended by that, so I probably wouldn't tell them unless it's like a great character. But I think in this book, certainly the main character, he's an amalgam of a lot of different types of personalities, as is his wife, or his soon to be ex-wife. They're very kind of specific personalities. I'm not a lot like the main character as a person. Some of our trappings are similar, our careers, where we live, is kind of similar, but as people, we're very, very, very different. But I think people have read the book and say, "Oh God, I hear your voice in your main character," and it's like, really, that's interesting. Okay, I guess I wrote it, so I guess this my sense of humor or observations or whatever. But all of the other characters they're just kind of amalgams. The character who's his mother, Joyce, who's his 84-year-old mother, who's one of my favorite characters in the book. She's patterned a bit after my aunt, who's no longer with us. But my aunt had a really wonderful, embracing way of talking to people and making you feel like you were the only person in the room when she was talking to you. And she was a cheerleader. She was very supportive. She had this great lilting voice, and she's always looking for the upside of everything. And so I kind of patterned the voice of Joyce on my aunt. So that was a little more specific. And if she was around, I definitely would have told her that it was patterned after her. She would have loved that. Yeah, I just think we all somebody once said we are all our main characters of everything we write. I mean, if you write a serial killer movie and that's your main character, you are that main character. There are elements of you in that character. How they murder people, I guess, is something how you would do it. But it's just, I don't know. I think it's just, sometimes it's who do I want a character to be? Who would I like to be around? In this book, Jeremy's son, Maddie, I love him. He's a great character. He's a 23-year-old young guy, and I'm like, this is the son I wish I could wake up and just have, at my age, because I just think he's great, and they have a really fun relationship, he and his dad, and I really like that character. So yeah, it just depends.
Yeah, I actually wanted to ask you about that, because one thing that I really adored about the novel, and that just was so heartwarming about it, was the love you really feel between the intergenerational love, right? So you have Joyce, Jeremy's mother, and then Maddie, Jeremy's son. But between the three of them, there's so much love and affection, and they really care about each other in a way that warmed my heart. So I'm just curious, is that aspirational, or are you reflecting on your own life, or are you fantasizing about like
probably both? I had a really great relationship with my mother. She died a long time ago. So it's kind of like that's sort of the relationship I probably would have had with her, had she lived. But it's the relationship I see with other, sometimes if you're lucky, with other adults and their elderly parents. When they love each other and they get along, they like being around each other. Not every parent and child likes to be around each other all that much. In this book, they like being around each other, and they come to depend on each other a lot, and I hope kind of healthy ways. And the relationship with his son is it's also kind of aspirational. It's a very kind of generous and kind of what would you say, very open relationship that the two of them have. They talk about everything, even though Jeremy, as the father, tries to sort of, pretend he doesn't hear certain things that his brash son will say. And then the son and his grandmother are also very close. They live near each other. They spend a lot of time together. They're good people. They're just flawed, and finding their way. And by the end of the book, they do find what they're looking for.
So I wanted to ask you too, in the book, there's this delicious love triangle. So Jeremy, at the beginning of the book, I'm not going to blow anything because it happens on like page 5, his wife of many, many years. How many years?
25 years.
25 years.
23 years, I think. Yeah.
23 years, but they were together also before that. And she leaves him, and he's really pining for her for quite a lot of the book. And, he's hurt. He's angry, but there's a lot of love there, as there is after 20 plus years of being with somebody. And then you introduce Annabelle, who's not a perfect character. She comes at you and she's very distant. She's got issues, and she's not as kind and loving and out of the gate as, is traditional in a romantic comedy, which, by the way, is really fresh and I love. It's not an obvious pairing. And so the push and pull in the love triangle is is genuine, right? Because I found myself at times not knowing who I wanted Jeremy to be with, which was a lot of fun, which made the read really interesting. So I'm curious, as a writer, do you think about the rooting interest, like who you want the reader to be pulling for? And were you going for a push and pull?
Well, I knew that I wanted Annabelle. I knew I wanted Jeremy and Annabelle to, that to be the central relationship. But I didn't really know how dark her underside was going to be. She's somebody who she's very friendly and a little eccentric and kind of out there and very easy, very relaxed when he first meets her. But the closer they get, the more her problems, her past. She's a widow. Her husband died the year before. This is the first guy that she's been interested in a year. First guy she's dated in forever, and that freaks her out. Ultimately, and Jeremy is kind of in a place where his wife has left, and she makes no bones about the fact she's not coming back, and he just finds himself very unexpectedly falling for this woman who's very, very different than his wife, his ex-wife. So yeah, I mean, I always knew in the end who would end up with who, but it's the journey, as like in any romantic comedy, and I guess this falls under that. You bring a character in, you probably know what the end is going to be, but it's how they get there that's interesting, and it's how they what the twisty ways, the unexpected ways of that relationship working. And I really tried to create in Cassie and his ex-wife somebody who was not a monster, somebody who was not so obviously wrong in any way. These are two people who just sort of drifted apart, and she realized it and he didn't, and which is often happens with people. One person thinks it's all going along okay, and then the other person is like, you really haven't been listening at all, for the last number of years, and she just decides to up and leave. But I didn't want her to be a monster. I mean, she's very firm. She wants to be away from him. She doesn't want to have anything to do with him. She needs her time to kind of reconnoiter and figure out what she's going to do with her life, and she wants to be out of his life, even though they live right near each other and they keep intersecting a lot, throughout the book, especially as these kind of weird things happen. It's kind of mini calamities befall him. So yeah, I think I knew I knew how I wanted it to end up. I wasn't always so sure where it was going to go or how they were going to get there.
But were you conscious when you were writing? Because it's one thing that I really admire about the book is you didn't make, you made both women characters attractive in specific ways, and you made them also problematic in specific ways. And I did, for much of the book, felt a lot of my rooting kind of vacillated a little bit. And there were times, just because of how Jeremy still felt about his ex-wife, that part of me, and also Joyce, there were moments when Joyce was like, oh no, you'll get back together with your ex-wife. And so I just thought that was really well done and really true to life, right? You didn't create some magical princess that you airdrop into your novel in the Annabelle character, where it's obvious they're going to be together. I didn't think it was that obvious. So I'm curious, as the writer, because when I write, I don't think so much about the rooting interest as much as I do when I direct, right? Because I'm trying to manipulate the audience with my directorial choices. But when I write, I kind of write as honest as I can. So were you thinking about that? Like when you were crafting how Annabelle or Cassie were behaving in a certain situation and how Jeremy was reacting, were you thinking like, oh, I'm going to push the needle this way or that way? Or did you just organically flow?
It felt pretty organic. I just wanted Annabelle to start out of the gate being one of those people you just are drawn to. You just love. She's adorable and she's funny and they have similar senses of humor. They get each other's sense of humor. Her clothing choices are kind of very eclectic and kind of adorable. And she pulls it off. She wears things that not everybody could wear and get away with it. But I wasn't, honestly, as a writer, I wasn't prepared for her dark side to come out the way that it did, and that was as their relationship evolved. I wasn't really prepared for that, and I also wasn't prepared for with Cassie how she would deal with all of this, because the person who leaves often has leavers remorse, or they just don't, they do it and they're brash about it and they think they're doing the right thing, and then all of a sudden it's like, wait, what did I do? And that's not her necessarily, but you never know, like when you do something, it seems right at the time, but is it a mistake? And with Jeremy, his journey was to go from being kind of phlegmatic and sort of like just not moving his life forward and kind of treading water, to being proactive and getting it together and taking risks and chances and these things he's kind of forced into it. But Annabelle is a big reason that he's forced into making these changes. And the closer they get, the less interested in his ex-wife he is, but things happen. So
That's so interesting to hear you say that her dark side, Annabelle's dark side, came out more than you had thought that it would.
Yeah.
It just makes it feel like, and I experienced this in my writing too, like sometimes a voice just starts sort of coming through and you follow that voice where it leads you, and it's full of surprises. So I don't know, that's like writing can be kind of magical in that way, right?
It is. It is. I have to say, I mean, with writing screenplays and scripts, TV scripts, I outline a lot. I know where I'm going. I really don't start writing until I have everything mapped out. I have all my scenes mapped out. I have all my themes, worked out. Writing this book, I knew where I wanted it to be, kind of in the middle of the book and at the end of the book. But how we got there, I sort of really let myself discover it. And those discoveries led to other things and opened me up to a lot of possibilities that I may not have thought about in a book form had I outlined everything. I hope the reader is as surprised at some of the things that happen in the book as I was when I wrote them, because they were things I really hadn't planned, and they just, I think they worked once I got them there, but it wasn't what I expected a lot of the time.
Well, I probably shouldn't confess this, especially since I write thrillers, but I think outlines are death. My first book, I didn't outline, and I just let myself be surprised. And the metaphor I like to use is like I'm walking through the woods, and there are lots of sort of mini paths you can take, an infinite number of mini paths. And so I follow the most interesting one, right? But whereas if I have an outline, I get bored when I'm writing. And I think that seeps in to the prose. If I'm bored, then it's not going to be interesting. So as dangerous as it is, and I do get myself into trouble sometimes, I'm not a person who outlines. And so I'm relieved to hear that you take liberties with your outlines too, even though your beginning, middle, and end. You want to have fun, right?
I want to take this minute to give a shout out to Susan's book, which is coming out October 1st. It's called Good is Dead. It's a fantastic thriller. She's never written a mystery thriller before. It's excellent. I hope everybody will go and read it after they read The Last Birthday Party. Good is Dead is very, very good.
Thanks you for that, Gary. Okay, I want to keep talking about the relationships because I'm kind of obsessed with the relationships in this book. And you have a line sort of 2/3 of the way through the book where Jeremy's character reflects on relationships as being easily breakable. And he refers to that not only in the context of his relationship with Annabelle, which is brand new, but also in relation to his 25-year marriage. And I think about that a lot. I've been in a 17-year marriage, and a lot of times when we write romance, we try to do this Cinderella story and make it very magical and seem, in your other life as writing TV movies that are often romance or romantic comedies, it's sort of very superficial, and they're on this speeding train and they're going to be together and we know it. And this idea that relationships are easily breakable intrigues me. And I'm just wondering if you really feel that way.
Yeah, I think even the best relationships, you have to be very vigilant with them. And it's very important to be vigilant, with the person in your life, because you want to do right by that other person. Sometimes we, just don't pay attention for a moment. And we don't realize something. You get comfortable, very comfortable with somebody, and over the course of the years, and you have to stay vigilant and fresh in your approach. And you see so many relationships that could zig-zag. In the book, Jeremy and Cassie, he says to her at some point, why didn't you talk to me about this? We could have gone to therapy, whatever. And as I said earlier, she was like, you haven't been listening to me the last 5 years. I've been talking to you. You just haven't been listening to what I've been saying. You haven't heard it. And so it is a world where she could have said, okay, look, this is our problem, and we need to go to therapy. We need to work it out. But she was so beyond that at that point. She just needed to leave. She just didn't feel it was fixable. It was not only breakable. She felt it was broken. he felt it would be fixable once he realized the fact that it actually was broken. But we, they hang by a thread a lot of the time, and especially the more tenuous a relationship is, and people who really hang in there for a long time, maybe they should, maybe they shouldn't. But they're sensitive relationships, and it's very important to stay aware of the other person and what's going on. So yeah, I think easily breakable is, that's not to say they're not fixable, but they are easily breakable.
That's so interesting. I'm thinking about one of my favorite moments from one of my favorite books, Eat, Pray, Love. And I think what's coming to my mind is the movie scene when Julia Roberts is sitting on the bench talking to an old Italian woman. Is she Italian? Right. And she says in her, in her broken attempt to speak Italian, she uses the phrase, "I broke it." Which just was really moving and obviously stuck with me. And I think the person she's talking to gets really mad, like, well, you should have tried harder. But this idea that relationships are easily breakable is really beautiful, and it's something I carry with me now when I think about love is a verb, right? It's something that we have to do. It's not a state of being in love so much as it's a state of doing.
Was that to say, after you read my book, you started being nice to your husband? Is that it?
Well, it does. Reading these books and you see how people treat each other, it does present the opportunity for some self-reflection. Good. I definitely saw some of my mistakes in some of the mistakes that Jeremy made. Right. And so yeah, I'll confess that. Right. My husband's not here, so I can say it out loud.
Done.
Yes, and thank you for that. Cheaper than therapy. So okay, tell me. I want to get a little bit personal because I think you told me at one point that this injury that Jeremy suffers early in the book, which is so dramatic and so fun to read and so unexpected, that a similar injury happened to you, and you never did tell me the story. So I want to hear the story of the actual injury.
Not only was it a similar injury, it was the same injury. I had about 5 years ago, I had a very bad rotator cuff tear. And it was so bad that the surgeon, when he was repairing it, said he'd never repaired a rotator cuff that was arthroscopically that was in such bad shape as mine was. Now, he didn't tell me that I'd be waking up in a brace because he didn't know how bad the tear was. You don't really know until you go in there. So I wake up out of anesthesia, and I don't even think I'm going to have anything, because I had this rotator cuff fixed a few years before that, and I had no sling, brace, or anything. It was a very different thing. So I wake up and I'm this giant thing. It was just, what is this? It's literally like, and I explain it, I think, in the book, like it's one of those things, like in a ballpark, somebody who's selling hot dogs or ice cream, those big squares, and it's over your shoulder. I wish I had a picture of it. It's hard to describe, but basically you're immobile. The right side of your body is immobile, and you can only take it off to shower. And it's really painful when you take it off, and you have to keep your arm in one position. So when this happened to me, I was like, this is really, it was a torturous 6 weeks with it, but I got through it, and I learned a lot, and there was a little comfort level in there, crazily somewhere. And I found a way to work and to write with my other hand. I finished a whole play that I wrote with my left hand. That was just so dogged not to be held back by this stupid accident. But mine wasn't really an accident. We don't even know how it happened. With Jeremy, he has a bad fall. He's reaching for a liquor bottle, which he shouldn't be doing anyway. And he has a terrible fall and ultimately injures his shoulder. But yeah, it's so specific that you could not write about this unless, at least in the same way, without having experienced it yourself. And there's a whole sequence in it where he has to take a shower for the first time, and taking a shower and taking this thing off, and the help that you need to do this was just, it could have been a half-hour episode of Seinfeld in and of itself. I mean, it was just so crazy. So I brought that to the book, and it was fun. It was fun to kind of exercise that demon of that brace, which was such it's a character in the book. It was a character in my life for 6 weeks. Had a big bonfire with it after the 6 weeks was over. It was just, I hated the thing, the big pillow. But anyway, but it was fun.
That I would like to see. So you're throwing the brace in a fire. Yeah, you have a brilliant description that I think I texted you right after I read it, because I was laughing so hard, of him trying to get in his ex-wife's, Cassie's, Mini Cooper.
Right, with his giant brakes. And I said that's why they call it a Mini Cooper and not a Maxi Cooper. Yeah, the thing was just gigantic. Yeah, and you can't drive. And when I had to get in and out of our car, I mean, it was crazy. I mean, the whole thing was crazy. I wish I had it on video to show everybody. I mean, it was really crazy. But I think I put it to good use with this book.
Yeah, right. What you know. And then you had another moment when he was in the bathroom.
And amortize all that pain, for sure.
And then you said about putting toothpaste on his toothbrush.
Right.
And then you just wrote, think about that.
Yeah, think about that. I mean, there's so many things you can't do with one. And our friend, we have a mutual friend, Ken Pisani, who wrote a fantastic book called Amped, which was about somebody who lost an arm. And he has actually a whole list in that book of, here are all the things you cannot do with one arm. And I thought about that as I was writing that. And the toothpaste thing was like, literally, how do you, if you're right-handed and you have no mobility and you have to put toothpaste on a toothbrush with one hand, how do you do that? Try to do it tonight. See what happens.
We dare you.
I don't remember what I did at the time. It was just crazy.
Okay, so I want to ask you something else, because I'm having an experience. So my book is coming out in 6 weeks, and I do have some early reviews coming in, and I write thrillers, and so I'm learning things from my reviews. And the thing that I'm learning in writing thrillers is that what people really, really expect and need from a thriller is to be surprised. Like, it's all about the twist in the thriller. And I didn't realize, I went to a lot of pains to create characters with depth and deep inner life. And I put a lot of myself in each one of those characters. But the big takeaway from reading the reviews was that people just liked the twist, and thank goodness it had a big twist. And I learned a lot about my genre and about how to write these kinds of books going forward. So I'm curious now, you've had some reviews and you've given the book to a lot of people, and it's not officially out, but it's out and you're getting feedback. Are you learning anything from your readers?
Yeah, well, first of all, when the reviews are good and you're connecting with people on a level you didn't even realize, I think that's always very interesting, because people, they talk about it like similar to movies and plays and things that I've written, but with a book, it still feels very personal and very specific, and that you kind of tap into something, or you have done something that you don't even realize you did, and someone will say, wow, that was really interesting metaphor. It's like, wow, that was a metaphor? What's a metaphor? And it's kind of like, you don't even realize you did something, that's kind of cool. So I think about that, and I can bring that, if it worked, I can bring it into other things that I write, and kind of try to do that again. But I realize that writing anything is so much about connecting to people and to be able to connect to characters. And so when people will say, oh, I love the characters, another author said, the characters are so real, I thought one of them was going to text me, which was just a fantastic thing somebody said. But it's very encouraging that you realize like how important it is to connect to your character, particularly your main character, but especially when you have a little ensemble, to kind of connect to everybody. And that doesn't mean everybody has to be good or nice or perfect. It's just more, can you relate to them? Can you relate to that thing about them, their flaw, what they're doing wrong, but why they're decent people, and how people can be very self-absorbed, but it doesn't mean anything personally, and all that. So I enjoyed the process of realizing that people were connecting to the characters, and continue to use that. So for the next time, we want, like the book I'm writing now, it's like I want to make sure that it's a very different kind of character, it's a very different tone, it's much more serious, but I want to make sure that people connect to my main character and his problems, and understand that if somebody, even though they do things that you don't agree with, or you think they're being silly or stupid, or they're getting their own way, we understand why they do that. So it's very important to understand, to relate to people. We don't have to like them so much. We want to relate to them and relate to their journey. So that's a big thing. That really jumped out a lot to me, with people talking about my characters and feeling like they knew them, and feeling that they wanted to be part of this family, which is really a wonderful thing for somebody to say. But writing characters that we relate to is really important.
Yeah, you're reminding me. So early in my career, I worked on a movie. I was an assistant director on a David Lynch movie. It was a very
Mm,
dark movie. It was called Twin Peaks Fire Walk with
mhm,
Me. And it was about the death
yeah,
of Laura Palmer. It was
yeah,
the prequel to the series, like who killed Laura Palmer. And in the movie, we actually see who killed Laura Palmer. And it's very dark. And there were moments in the screenplay where he cut to an image, like cut to an owl in a tree. And I went up to him and I said, David, what does that mean? Like, why are we cutting to an owl in a tree? Do we really have to go shoot that? You know, here I am, 20 years old, not knowing anything about anything. But I really wanted to know. I said, David, what does it mean? And he said, you know, if it doesn't mean anything to you, it doesn't mean anything at all. And I think about that. I mean, that was many, many years ago that David said that to me. And I
shoot
just
the
think
owl.
about like when you write a book or you make a movie, um, and you put it out in the world, you're basically just giving it to your audience or to your reader. And they get to do with it what they want, right? They
Right,
get to pull out of it what they want. And hopefully, if you did your job, you put a lot of varying things in there that a wide range of people will pull from, right? Not just people just like you who think like you do and will see the same things that you do, that you put enough variety of experiences and emotion through your characters that everybody will get something or be reminded of a moment or have a feeling that is all their own. And so the idea that, you know, we set out to kind of take a reader on a journey, but we can't prescribe what that journey is.
right,
They will read something, they'll meet a character, and we can't make them like them or not like them. We can't create an image that means something. You know, we can have an intent, but they get to decide what it means, if it
right.
means anything at all.
Well, we bring so much of ourselves as a reader, as a viewer, to what we're watching, and especially every different time of your life. At different times in your life, you bring something different. So I can watch a movie now that I watched 20 years ago and had one reaction to, and now 20 years later, I read it and say, "Oh yeah, I've experienced that since, and I really relate to what happened in this movie." Versus maybe 20 years ago, I hadn't experienced it or hadn't been old enough to experience something, and it was like, yeah, it didn't have the same kind of impact. Everybody brings their own thing, good and bad, you know, to what they watch, and everybody pulls that relates to things in a different way. So, you know, your main character can be a man, but you know, you can see somebody you know that's a woman who acts the same way, you know, or something, and you relate. Oh, that man reminds me of my sister, my aunt, you know, whatever. It's personalities, you know, which is creating these, you know, vessels for them to be in, but it's really that personality and its personality traits. And you know, especially where humor is concerned, the best humor I think is when it comes out of character. You know, when it's not just sort of contrived banana fall on a banana peel humor, but really when it comes out of character and putting characters in difficult situations, putting them where they would least like to be and where they're most uncomfortable and they have the most to learn, and that can bring, I think, some great humor out of things. People's discomfort can make you know, can be very funny. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, I'm having fun rediscovering now that there's Netflix and shows are being re-released on the streamers, right? Shows we may have watched 10 or 15 or even more than that years ago. And now watching them with a more mature eye or a more world weary eye in
yeah.
some instances, then I'm getting something very different out of the show. Or a show that I absolutely loved
Yeah.
in my 30s is like, yeah, that doesn't
Less
really
relevant
resonate for
now.
me
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, for sure, less relevant. Well, you know, especially when you write a book, people like a movie, people pick up the book years later, and you hope that people can respond to that. The emotions are kind of timeless, even if references and locations and things have changed over time. That the emotions, the dynamics between people, is kind of timeless and maintains itself. And yeah, you know, we can only tell the stories that we want to tell, that we feel comfortable telling, that we think we can tell well, and hope people relate to them. And not everybody will, but for those who do and really appreciate it and know what you're doing, and as a writer, you know, it's very gratifying to be for people to be moved by something, to make people laugh, to you know, for people to relate to something, for people to cry, whatever. I mean, it's fantastic, you know, to be able to do that and relate to people that way through your work and through your words. So, you know, we'll see what people think.
I mean, nothing's more gratifying, right? To have written something and have somebody come back to you to say, wow, that moment, whatever it was, that character experienced just made me feel less alone with the way that I experienced something similar. I made a movie with the actress Sharon Stone about a woman who's over 50 who kind of gets her life together for the first time. She's been just sort of fumbling around. And for the first time, she meets a man and is mature enough to be in a relationship. And I did a screening of it. And after the screening, a woman in the audience came up to me and said, and she was crying. And she said, I just gone through a terrible divorce. I lost everything. I lost my home. I lost my sense of self. And to see somebody my age up there on the screen, and Sharon Stone no less, fumbling the way that I feel like I'm fumbling, but having a second chance at love was so inspiring. And I'll tell you what, Gary, like if nobody else saw the movie after that, I would have been fine because I put something in the world that made one person feel comforted. In a moment. So that's kind of why we do it, right?
Yeah. And also, I think when you can draw on some real things that have happened to you or things that you've seen happen to other people that are real, and you can kind of use it and kind of repurpose it for something. People respond to things that are real. People respond to moments that are real. There are probably some moments in this book that happened to me or somebody that I know that I've kind of repurposed, for these characters. And I hope because those really happened, they become those things that people really respond to because it happened. They don't have to know how it happened, who it happened to, but people feel that it's real, and that's how you can try to relate to people and relate to your reader. I think it's very important. But with this book, it was tricky balancing. It wasn't until more recently that I started calling it a romantic comedy because I guess it needed its niche. But I always looked at it more of a family dramedy because there's so much stuff that goes on and serious stuff too in the flashbacks especially. And it was very important to me that people understood how these people became who they are based upon their past. So I have Jeremy flashing back a lot to his relationship with Cassie and how they met and moments of joy along the way. And then those moments as the years went on that maybe weren't so as great. So we understand why people, why people are who they are, what they do. I'm fascinated by the concept, and I don't think I've written enough about this, about the idea of what brings people together, people who love each other brings them together, and then what splits those exact same people apart. How you can go from love, honor, and obey, I want to spend the rest of my life with you, to I hate you, which way is the divorce lawyer, over the course of X number of years. How does that happen? Is it inevitable, or is it like we talked about earlier? Is it breakable? Is it fixable? And I think that's a really fascinating thing, and people who get together at a very young age. In the book, Jeremy and Cassie get together at 20. She's 22, he's 23. They're very young, and they're together a long time. By the time they're both about 50, and how do you know back then, what you really want? But then there are people who meet when they're high school sweethearts. They meet and they're together for 75 years. How does that happen to some people, and why with other people it doesn't? So I really wanted to explore that. But to me, it was very important that people really understood why these characters did what they did. What drew Jeremy and Cassie to each other when they first met, and how those same things that drew them to each other pulled them apart. Our best qualities are our worst qualities sometimes. So he loved the fact that she was a bit challenging, and he thought that was kind of sexy, and she was kind of a little elusive, but he liked that. And all that, and she liked the fact that he took care of her. He was very just kind of very down to earth, and she liked that. He was safe for her. And then, but all that stuff over the course of the years stops working for people sometimes. But I didn't want people to read the book and go, what are these two people doing together to begin with? It's very important to me that people understood, because how often do you watch something or read something and say, why are these people friends? What are these two people doing together? Why are they married? Why are they in a relationship? So I think that's kind of important too. And you have that opportunity in a book. You have that opportunity in a movie with flashbacks, but in a book, I feel like it really lends itself much better to flashbacks. And it was really fun writing those and fleshing out the characters in this book.
You know what? I just learned something, because I learned what some of that push and pull was for me. Like I said, I thought it was a love triangle, whether you meant it as one or not. That's how I experienced it. And part of the reason I was pulling at times for Jeremy to be with Cassie was the way that you wrote those flashbacks. Was they had this thing in a moment, right? When they met, he felt a certain way, and it was a all-encompassing kind of love. It was a fiery kind of love, and that existed in a moment of time. And so I got attached to that, and I wanted him to have that kind of fiery, all-encompassing love. But that moment in time was gone, and it took me personally some time. I guess I needed that 250 pages in the middle to kind of process, like, they're not those people anymore. They were different people when they met than they are now. And that depth of emotion and that fire that they felt might not be possible where they are now.
Right. And fire is great, but does it last? You know, relationships are really about maintenance and all of that. And fire, it can burn out. And these two people were very, very different people. They just found each other and ended up together. But by all rights, they probably shouldn't have been together. But it worked. It worked for long enough, I guess.
All right. Well, I'm going to disagree that they shouldn't have been together, because I think that was a very beautiful period of both their lives, right? Yeah. And you know, I look back.
Well, they belonged together at that point, I guess. You know, but it was no, yeah.
I mean, I had a relationship for the 3 years before I turned 21, and I feel very lucky that I experienced that sort of stupid love. Like crazy stupid love, to love somebody to that extent and just feel gaga. And now, reflecting back on that, was it sustainable? I don't know, but I feel really lucky that I had that experience. Just like I feel very lucky that I got the experience of like climbing a mountain. I'm very happy to be down from that mountain now, but I'm glad I had that experience. And
every relationship leads you to the next relationship also. You know, I don't think Jeremy would have ended up with Annabelle had he not had the relationship with Cassie. I mean, it's like you kind of realize what it is that you need and what works for you, and you take the good from every relationship and then maybe bring it into the next. So I think they're all really valuable. It's like jobs. It's like you can have a job and it may not seem, what am I doing with this job, but then it leads you to the next job and the next job and the next job, and we learn from it. So it's the same with people.
But in terms of the experience of the novel, I'm really grateful to you that you showed those two kinds of love almost side by side, right? And they didn't come off as flashbacks so much to me as just character development that was organic to the book. And I got to experience Jeremy in a moment with Annabelle and falling in love in this moment, but also falling in love with Cassie back when they fell in love. And that was a real gift. I really enjoyed that ride. I enjoyed being on those two tracks almost simultaneously, or just jumping from one track to the other as seamlessly as you did it, because I got to indulge in some of my memories of feeling that kind of love at that age. And it's a really beautiful part of the book that for me lingered. So
thank you very much.
Yeah, even though that wasn't, when you think of a rom-com, it's like, oh, that new person, and it's a two-hander for those people. But for me, it was very much a three-hander.
Yeah, I think so, and I'm glad. One of my favorite authors is Ann Tyler, and she's written many books, but she wrote The Accidental Tourist, and which was the first book of hers I read, and I love the book. And there's a similar triangle in that, and I kind of liken this a little bit to that story. And she is somebody who always inspires me as a writer, because she can burrow into the tiniest life event and make it really, really special. Like, not much happens in her books. They're all like these little moments in life, and they're very, very small. Everybody's life is really tiny, but she makes it so fascinating and so interesting, and brings us into it with this like really kind of wry humor and truth, which I love. And if I've channeled any of that in this book, I feel really lucky, because I'm just such a big fan of hers. But yeah, there's definitely a similarity to that particular book and movie, The Accidental Tourist, with this. If you haven't seen that movie, it's great. It's one of my favorites.
Spoken from a film critic. Oh, and there's
Yes.
Sophie. I guess we're going to have to turn it over to questions. We love book lovers, and we want to hear what they have to say.
Yeah, so this first question comes from Lynn, who writes, you were able to write women very well. Tell us about how, as a man, you're able to do that.
Good question. Thank you. Well, writers write, and we write. I've written many characters in my career who were not me, who were not anything to do with me per se, But I think I've certainly, as all of us, I've known a lot of women. I've been around a lot of women. I've have women family members. I have women friends, and I just pull just that as personality. I wrote a stage play that was on here in LA about 4 years ago called April, May, and June. It was about three sisters, and they were three adult sisters a year apart from each other. And I didn't really pattern them after anybody. It was just basically that kind of three, the middle sister, older sister, younger sister, that kind of general dynamic among that kind of those three personalities. And people walked out and they would go, "How did you write women so well? I love them. There are only three women in the whole play." And it was like, "Oh, I don't know. I just wrote. I wrote them from the heart and wrote what I knew." And it's about character. You can be anybody. It's a character. It's character traits. How we build a character. How we move them into new parts of their lives. How we fix what's broken. How we have a character change, male, female, whatever. And I like writing women. It's fun. I've written a lot of really great women. And also, as somebody who's written many romantic comedies, TV movies, a lot of Hallmark films and whatever, which are all romantic comedies and or romantic dramas in one way or another, they're basically all female driven. So I've had a lot of experience writing women. But yeah, a writer writes, ultimately, if you're writing somebody who's a serial killer, a doctor, somebody from another country, I mean, basically, if we're good writers, we should be able to channel all of that and just create good characters. So, but I'm very honored when somebody says I write women well. I'm just really thrilled about that. Thank you for the question.
All right, this next one is from Brian, who writes, did you find that your facility writing dialogue as an asset? And also, how did you integrate the dialogue with all the opportunity for prose and inner voice writing that the novel offers?
Really good question. Thanks, Brian. In a book, you can, in a movie, you can't really have a lot of inner life for a character because unless you have voiceover, which sometimes gets kind of weighty and clunky. But in a book, I found my style of writing this book there was a lot of inner life. I wrote the book in third person, but there's a lot of inner life for Jeremy, and he narrates the whole book basically, or we as a third person observer, we're seeing it through his eyes. So a lot of it was how much do we tell, and how much does he become his inner monologue, and how often, and this is the interesting part, where you don't have to have a whole series of dialogue with characters, but you can sum up what the characters have said, and then you can jump into dialogue to continue it. Because unlike a script, which is many short scenes basically that are mostly filled with dialogue, unless it's a big action movie, in a book, you want to mix the prose and the narrative and the dialogue. So it's not, you don't have like long pages of back and forth dialogue. You can't, I'm not comfortable with that. I didn't want to do that too much. So it was really a combination of using dialogue where it was necessary and where it moved the story forward. And here's another thing what's interesting in the book, where sometimes you're kind of reiterating the same thing that you've already said in a previous scene, so you don't want to repeat that dialogue again. You don't need those characters when Jeremy's telling one thing to one character and then recounting it for the same thing for another character. You don't really need him to they don't need that same conversation, that same dialogue. He will just say, "So I told my mother that Cassie left, and we talked about it," as opposed to like, "Ma, you won't believe what happened. Cassie left. Oh my God, what happened?" We don't need to go through that all over again. So yeah, I learned a lot, by doing this. But I love writing dialogue, and I hope the dialogue that I do write is fun in the book. Thanks for the question.
All right, this one is from Nancy, who wants to know, how did you connect with your publisher?
I have a wonderful publisher. They're called Hadley House. They're relatively new. They're a couple of years old. I found I had submitted my book to a lot of agents. And at the same time, I was submitting it to these independent publishers who you could submit directly to. You didn't have to have an agent to submit them to. And there were a lot of them. Everybody's got a website. And I was very intrigued by a bunch of these publishers that were accepting it. They seemed kind of selective about what they would take. But everybody, it was nichier. You could be a little bit nichier than with a lot of the big publishing houses. So I submitted it to a number of these. I had a handful of them that were really interested in the book. I met with all of them on Zoom, and because yeah, we did Zoom. Most of them were on Zoom. And again, I wrote this. I finished during the pandemic, and obviously still in the pandemic, so it was very Zoomy. And I found that in Hadley House that it's run by 3 women. And it was very important to me to have a woman's point of view and perspective in selling this book, because women are the primary readers, they're the primary book buyers. And my main character is a man, and I wanted to make sure that women could relate to the man. And I like the idea that I would have women who were going to be marketing the book and getting it out there. And they assured me that, you know, the women would really respond to my main character because the kind of guy that he was. So that was encouraging. I don't know. I love these women. They were great. They totally got the book. We just hit it off. And then I met with other groups, and ultimately I felt this would be a good place to be. And it's been really great. So I've been very, very fortunate with them. It's been a really, really good pairing. Thanks for the question, Nancy.
All right, and this last one is from Marcia, who wrote, is there a character in the book who you would like to have spend more time with, and can we expect a sequel?
Oh, well, I don't know about a sequel. That would be nice. We'll see what the demand is for a sequel. But you know, I love all the characters in this, but I do love Joyce, who's the mom, the 84-year-old mom, and I'd love to sit down and have a meal with her. And partly it's just missing my own mother, but I just think she's a really wonderful character, and because she's patterned after my aunt, who's not with us anymore, I would love to be seeing her too. So yeah, I would say Joyce. Thanks for the question. Appreciate it.
All right, so thank you guys so much for doing this. This was awesome.
Oh, it was great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And
thanks for your hosting too, Sophie. It was great. And Susan, I really appreciate it. You know, Susan's a wonderful person, a wonderful writer. I'm so honored to be her friend. And thanks everybody for watching and being part of it, and for all the support. Really means the world to me. I hope you enjoyed the book. Let me know.
And thank you guys. Thank you, Gary, for giving me the opportunity to talk to you today. I got my questions answered. So thank you. I did. I had my own questions. And Sophie, thank you for hosting, and to Belmont Books. Go Sox.
Yes, absolutely. Bye, everybody. Take care.
bye.
Bye. Thanks.